We all have a story. Your story is not my story, and my story is not yours. However, we can find joy, hope, and emotional healing even through our most painful moments in life. Let's walk and take this journey of healing together, one step at a time, because your story does not define you.
Hey, God's beautiful people. It's Dr. Naisha here. I know it's been a couple of months since the last episode that I recorded, but look, y'all, I have been super busy doing some amazing things that I cannot wait to share with you today. And I am so glad to be back here on this platform with you all today and excited to be able to share with you some of the things that I have had going on for the past couple of months. Look, y'all. We made the cut once again. We are here to live and testify of God's grace and His mercy and how it has shined upon us once again. And we are in the land of the living, breathing, living, and doing well, I hope. What a blessing. Welcome back to Your Story Does Not Define You, the podcast. I'm so excited that you have decided to join me once again. If this is your first time tuning in, I want to say welcome and thank you so much for tuning in to Your Story Does Not Define You. Look, please follow this podcast, y'all, and share it with a friend. I want you to tell everybody about it because it's something for everyone on this podcast that we can all lean into. We can share our stories and we can hear what somebody else has to say, and we can take this information and we can share it with somebody else. So y'all, like, follow, share this podcast. It would mean so much to me. I really appreciate you in advance. So everybody knows what's coming next. What is your vibe today? What is your vibe today? How did you wake up this morning? What space were you in this morning when you woke up? My vibe today is I am still overjoyed and my cup is full and running over. I had a conference this past weekend, a women's conference called It Hurts to Heal, and we are going to have some conversation about that conference today. And look, y'all, I have been on an emotional high. I have been filled with so much gratitude. My heart has been overjoyed and I've just been in a space of just gratefulness and thankfulness to God because, I put the conference on. However, I keep telling everybody that when, people are sharing their feedback about the conference and telling me how much it blessed them and how much they enjoyed it, the only response that I really can say is to God be the glory. God gave me this vision. I feel like I was just the person that was tasked to the assignment to put the conference on. He gave it to me. I listened. I was obedient, and I intentionally prayed and fasted weeks in advance, months in advance before the conference, that God would just come in and provide a space where the women that were in attendance can heal and that no woman left the same way they came. Even myself, I was an attendee too. Even though I was the host of the conference and I was the keynote speaker, I still was an attendee. So I would say that my vibe today has been overjoyed. I put the conference on this past Friday. I did end up getting a little sick, so I do sound a little congested today. However, I cannot let another day go by without recording this episode because I have been so excited and in so much intention and anticipation to share with you all just some of the things about the conference. And I want to share some things with you that I shared at the conference and some things that I didn't get to share. So I hope you all are ready. I hope you all put your seatbelts on, buckle your seatbelts, because I am going to take you on a ride of talking about It Hurts to Heal. But before we do that, I want you to make sure that you check your vibe. What is your vibe today? Because remember, you control your vibe. Remember that you are in control of how you feel. If you wake up in the morning and you don't feel your best, remember, you get to control that. You can take a minute, reground yourself, regroup yourself, and allow yourself to be in a different space, right? Because sometimes I do understand that we wake up and we don't feel our best. Maybe we're a little anxious. Maybe we're a little depressed. Maybe we didn't sleep well. Maybe we're just tired. But remember, you can take the opportunity to just pause and take a moment and reground yourself. The first thing that I do every morning when I get out of bed is I say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to wake up in the morning. And then I allow myself the opportunity to just feel myself. I start feeling how my arms feel, how my neck feel, how my back feels, and just allow myself to wake up and really feel the day and feel what space I am in. And if I notice that my vibe is off as I begin to start my day, I definitely try to shift my mood and shift my attitude so that I can show up for myself and for others in a space that is comfortable for me and that is pleasant for me and also pleasant for others. So with that, y'all, I really want to talk about this conference that I had over the past weekend. We were in a room full of about 260 women that showed up. And when I say my heart is full just to be allowed to be in that space and to experience the experience with everyone. So again, I just want to talk about it. So as I mentioned, the topic was It Hurts to Heal. And some of the things that I want to share with you today are some of the things that I shared at the conference. However, I do want to allow this space to be a platform for me to go a little bit deeper into what that looks like. And I talked a little bit about wound care, and I want to talk about wound care today. So as we talk on this platform today, I just want to provide you some knowledge and education on about trauma and on about healing and how we learn to move past that hurt, how we can embrace that hurt and pain of healing and turn that hurt and pain into good pain and embrace it and actually be excited about the journey of healing, because even though it hurts to heal, this is the good pain that we want to feel. This is the pain that we want to feel that allows us to move to a space where we can actually process these things in a healthy manner and allow ourselves to be in a space of vulnerability to heal. So just want to have a little conversation about that. So a couple of things that I'm going to cover, a few things that I'm going to cover on this platform today is that I want to talk about trauma and what that looks like. I want to talk about trauma and why it hurts to heal. And then lastly, I just want to talk about some strategies and offer you all some strategies on how to heal. So when we think about trauma and we talk about trauma, you know, I've had conversations on some of the other podcasts about trauma and what that looks like. So if I provide you the dictionary definition of trauma, it's basically a deeply distressing or disturbing event. That is the dictionary definition of trauma, or one of the dictionary definitions of trauma. So if I give you my personal definition of trauma, I would like to offer you the definition of it's anything that comes into your life and disrupts your life in any form or fashion and shifts the way or changes the way that you think about people, about how you think about the world, about how you think about yourself, about how you think about God. This is what trauma. So it's like a tornado or a earthquake that comes into your life and that shifts things out of place and that makes you feel a certain way after that particular situation or experience happens. And so if we can go a little bit deeper, the Greek word for trauma is wound. And so I really, really want to just focus on trauma and wound interchangeably, because trauma means wound, wound means trauma. So I really want you to get a picture in your mind. I want you to get a picture in your mind of a wound. So one of the analogies that I shared at the conference is if you look at the analogy of somebody that has a deep cut on your arm. Now imagine if you fall and get hurt, fall off a bike or fall out of a tree or whatever. If you do something that causes you to get a deep cut on your arm or somewhere on your body, when we first get this cut, we know that, okay, it hurts. It hurts a lot. And sometimes during this process of this hurt, we have to clean this wound and we have to, clean it out because maybe it got dirty. We don't want it to get infected. So we bandage it and we cover it up, right? So if we think about the wound, over time, our body works really, really hard to heal that wound. But if we keep bumping that wound against something and or if we scratch it, if the bandage comes off and we accidentally hit it, okay, now we are reopening this wound, because if we bump it into something, it hurts. And sometimes where it may have been a scab, sometimes that scab comes off, or either the bandage comes off, and then now this wound is reopened and it's still in the process of healing, right? And so if we think about this wound, if we don't take the time to care for it properly, sometimes the wound doesn't heal properly, but instead it stays raw, painful, and is sensitive, even sometimes when it's not visible to others. So sometimes we have physical wounds on our body, or we deal with physical situations where other people may not see and may not know. However, we know that that wound is there. And so trauma works very similarly like that wound. So when we think about trauma can be viewed as an emotional wound that can hurt deeply at first, and it takes time for us to heal this wound, right? But if it's not dealt with properly, or if we continue to get triggered in the process of this wound being healed, it definitely feels like we're continuing to reopen it. And even if it's something that happened a long time ago, if we do not properly heal this wound, and if we do not properly process this wound and talk about this wound, which is a trauma, that during this process of healing, it hurts. And in order for this wound to heal, it hurts. So I want to offer another analogy that I also shared at the conference, which is I talked about trauma can also look like carrying like a heavy broken purse. And because this conference was specifically geared towards women, this is why I provided the purse analogy. However, you definitely can look at the cut arm analogy, or you can look at this purse arm analogy. But one of the things that I shared is that imagine that you have a purse that is like your favorite purse, and just say this is your go-to purse that you carry all the time. So it could be a bag that you got from Walmart. It could be a Coach bag. It could be a Gucci or Louis Vuitton bag. It could be a Michael Kors bag, whatever a favorite bag that you have that you like. Over time, this bag can get damaged, right? Because if we carry it all the time, because this is our favorite bag and we just love to carry this bag, regardless if it matches our outfits or not, we love this bag, right? So the more we carry it, the bag begins to obtain wear and tear to the point where, okay, the strap might break. A part of the purse or the bag may tear. You might lose a zipper and the zipper doesn't work anymore. And this bag that was so conveniently your favorite bag begins to wear off, right? And the more things that we put into this bag, we keep weighing it down with things thinking like, oh, it's going to hold up. This is my favorite bag. I love it. It's not going to deteriorate. But the more and more we keep carrying that bag every day, the more and more we keep putting things into that bag and stuffing things into that bag, guess what? Eventually it breaks down to the point that ultimately we're going to have to find a new favorite bag. So if we think about trauma like this broken purse or this broken bag, we can carry it around every day. And even though sometimes it feels heavy and sometimes it feels uncomfortable, we just get used to that weight. And we keep stuffing things in and packing things in and shoving things to the side because we don't want to deal with it in the moment. And we just keep carrying it around like that purse. We just keep putting things in. And over time, we keep adding and adding and adding. Eventually, those things take an emotional toll on us. And it affects us emotionally, and it affects our mental well-being. So when we begin to heal from trauma, it's definitely like acknowledging that, okay, we have this purse that is broken, that needs to be fixed, and we can't carry it anymore. These are the things that we have to think about, that if we don't figure out what to do with all of these things that we're carrying around, eventually it's going to wear us down. So we have to get to a point where we can make this load lighter. So when you think about some of the things that you're carrying that can be considered traumatic to you, I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about, what are you carrying? What is your experience? What is your traumatic experience where have you been wounded? What have you been holding on to secretly that nobody knows about? Is it grief and loss? Is it rejection, abandonment, betrayal? Is it sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect? Is it lack of safety, lack of emotional connection, lack of belonging, lack of support? Is it not being loved and feeling love? Have you been called names that have offended you? Is it failed relationships? Is it narcissistic abuse? Is it not feeling accepted? Is it pregnancies, abortions? Have you had to birth a stillborn? Is it betrayal? Is it a parent and child relationship? Do you have the need for perfection? Have you been violated? Is it friendship hurt? Is it distress, unforgiveness? Is it vicarious trauma? Is it cultural or generational trauma? Maybe your parent or your partner talked to you in a way that didn't make you feel good. Or maybe your parent didn't show up for you the way that you needed them to. And the list can go on and on. However, I really want you to take a moment and think about, what is your wound? What is that emotional experience or that emotional distress that you have experienced that has caused you to be wounded? Whatever that looks like for you, whether it's one wound or whether it's multiple wounds. Because yes, some of us have complex trauma, which just means that we have a lot of different things that we have experienced life, and life has happened for us. Whatever your story is, I just want you to know that within our own personal experiences, that we have all experienced something in our lives that have been painful and has caused us some type of hurt. And if I can just support you in this moment, and if I could just validate you in this moment and tell you that your hurt and pain is valid. Your hurt and pain is valid. And just because you may not have the same trauma experience that someone else has, and just because you feel that what you have been through is nothing compared to someone else's, I just want you to know that regardless of your situation and what that is your truth. And because of that, everyone experiences and processes trauma differently. And it doesn't mean that what I've experienced and what you've experienced will have a universal impact on all of us, because the way that my experience has affected me is not the same way that your experience has affected you. So whatever your truth is, whatever your experience is, I want you to know that that is your truth and that your hurt and pain is valid. So why does trauma hurt? And why does it hurt to heal? So again, I want you to look at trauma as something that is beyond just a mental experience. However, I want you to view trauma as a deep emotional and psychological experience that comes into your life and it disrupts your whole entire world. Again, it's like a tornado or an earthquake that shakes you to your core. And it changes the way that you think about the world, about yourself, about others, and sometimes God or your higher power, whatever that may be. Because trauma is not just the emotional experience, but trauma is also a bodily experience. So when you experience a traumatic situation, the way that you are affected is because it causes you some emotional distress. And I want you to know that your emotions are bodily experiences. So it affects our body and it affects our nervous system, because sometimes when we experience trauma, we have a really, really hard time processing the event and processing the emotions. So when we experience trauma or we go through some type of stressful, traumatic event in our life, whatever those things that we experience sometimes shatters our sense of self. It shatters our security. It shifts our core beliefs. The way that we think about ourselves and the way that we view ourselves, that is our core beliefs. And sometimes it leaves us feeling helpless and struggling with these upsetting and uncomfortable emotions and memories and anxiety that can be so challenging to overcome. So if we could go back to the cut on the arm analogy, when we initially experience an event that we consider to be traumatic or stressful, it leaves us in a state of shock and feeling overwhelmed, because initially it's too much to process at the time, and we sometimes feel helpless in the moment, or we're afraid or confused or sad or upset. So where it affects our bodies is that when we experience trauma, our bodies activate our sympathetic nervous system, which sends us into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response mode. Now, I know some of you have heard that before, and I want you to understand that when we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, our brain is saying, hey, survival mode activate, because in the moment, whatever we are experiencing, whether we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, our brain is saying, hey, you have to go into survival mode to be able to get through this, whatever that looks like for you. So in that moment, we have a heightened state of fear, and we are on the edge and having an extreme amount of anxiety. And during that moment, if the trauma is not resolved, whatever response we have can be prolonged, and this ultimately affects our bodies, not just in a way that we feel it in the moment, but it can lead to chronic stress, muscle tension, fatigue, and pain. So if you think about it, the emotional shock and stress response then affects us psychologically, because we feel a sense of loss of safety in the moment. We have a sense of loss of trust, sometimes a loss of identity, a loss of control, and a lot of times, depending on what our experience is, we feel powerless in that very moment, which again, it affects our ability to cope, and it affects our ability to cope in future life events that we may experience, because again, when we lose that sense of trust, and we lose that sense of safety and that sense of self-control, it's almost like we gain a fear of being in another situation, because we don't know what we're going to do or how we're going to respond to that. So if we look at these feelings that we experience emotionally, these feelings can lead to potentially anxiety, depression, guilt, feelings of abandonment, rejection, anger, disassociation, derealization, or depersonalization. And so when we think about this and we think about all of these emotional struggles, all of these things contribute to us being on the struggle bus. Just meaning that, okay, we are having a difficult time processing these emotions, and we do not know what to do. Because if the memory of the traumatic experience that we experience is not processed properly, it gets trapped in our brains, and this causes us to relive that event over and over again. So when we find ourselves in a space where we are having flashbacks and we are having nightmares, we're having intrusive thoughts, these things are a buildup of these unprocessed emotions that is associated with our trauma. And sometimes these things manifest into physical pain. Sometimes it manifests into self-inflicted pain, where we find ourselves engaging in self-inflicting behaviors, whether that be cutting or whether that's sexually inflicted behaviors. Sometimes it increases our anxiety. And when we experience these things, when we go through all of these different emotions and our body is sending us all these signals and telling us all these things, and we're feeling all these things, this is our body sending us signals telling us, hey, something is going on. Something is going on inside of you, and something needs to be addressed. So when we think about triggers, I want to talk about triggers for a little bit. So as I kind of explained to you about how our brains when it tries to process some of these emotions, sometimes it gets stuck. And so when it gets stuck, okay, we have, again, these intrusive thoughts, flashback, nightmares. Sometimes we have visions. Okay, sometimes, again, we have derealization, which is just us disconnecting from the world. And then sometimes we have depersonalization, which is us disconnecting from ourselves and having an out-of-body experience. So this is where triggers come from. Because ultimately, when you experience a traumatic event, and if your brain gets stuck in that moment of your trauma, anytime you feel any feeling or emotion that is the same feeling that you felt in the moment of your traumatic experience, you get triggered. Ultimately, you may not always know, okay, that your trigger is associated with a specific trauma, but sometimes after you give it some thought, or either after you go to therapy and have a therapist help you, then you're able to connect the dots and see where the trigger came from. So let's talk about, why does it hurt to heal? Now, healing, I want you to understand this, is a deeply personal and ongoing journey. And that just means is that the healing process is not a one and done process. One of the things that I like to share with people is that when you think about healing and you think about your healing journey, I want you to get in your mind. So I used to run track. So I'm going to use a track analogy. So I was a sprinter. So I used to run the 100-yard dash, the 200-yard dash, the 4x1 relay. When you think about your healing journey, I want you to know that we are not doing the 100-yard dash. When you are on your healing journey, it's like running cross country. You're doing like the 3,000 meter or the 3,200 meter. It is an ongoing process that takes time. And I want you to understand that the process of healing, it causes us to have to be transparent and honest with our truths, which sometimes is so hard to do. But in order for us to be able to go through this process, we really have to learn to tap into those feelings and emotions that some of us have suppressed or ignored for so long. And we really have to tap into those things and be transparent with whatever that truth is. Now, when we do this, sometimes this does require us to have to relive those experiences all over again. Because as we talk about it and as we tell our story, sometimes we feel those same feelings and emotions, as I mentioned earlier, that we felt right in the moment of whatever our traumatic experience was. So when we have to address this, this is us taking the bandage off of that wound that was once covering it up. This is us taking the necessary steps that we have to take to go through the process to heal. And one of the things that I'll say is that I don't know about you all, but it's hard to sit with our ugly truth and painful truth, because sometimes for me, it's really hard to wrap our mind around some of the things that we have experienced. Sometimes it's really hard to say, that really happened to me. Sometimes it's really hard to say, I really did that. Sometimes it's hard to say, I really allowed myself to compromise and stay in that. Look, y'all, believe you me, I get it. I am not talking at you. I am talking with you. I am talking to us, because I have been there too. I have had to sit with some of my ugly truths that people don't even know about, that turned into traumatic experiences for me. I have had to be honest and sit with those truths. However, I will say that it was so worth it, because if you want to heal, you have to sit with those truths. You have to be honest and transparent with yourself. And look, I'll tell y'all, you also have the option to definitely keep that bandage on, and you don't have to deal with those truths. However, this will prolong your healing process. And eventually, if you do not address these things willingly, at some point in your life, you are going to be forced to address them. Because no matter how long you have tried to bury it, and no matter how much you wish it would just go away, and no matter how long ago it happened, and no matter how long you feel like, okay, I've had this under control, at some point in your life, if that experience was not processed correctly, then you better believe it's going to show up. And sometimes it'll show up when you least expect it. It'll show up in your relationships. It'll show up in your friendships. It'll show up in your attitudes. It'll show up in your behaviors. It'll show up in how you show up for yourself. And it'll also show up in how you show up and interact with others. Sometimes we have behaviors and we don't really understand, like, why do we do certain things, or why do I respond to things a certain way? But if you were to sit down and really do some hard work with processing your trauma, you will see that you will be able to connect the dots. And a lot of the ways that you show up for yourself in relationships and with others is ultimately connected to some experience in your life that didn't feel good for you. So let's talk a little bit about how we process our trauma and why some of the experiences really hurt, whereas some of them may not as hurt as much. So when we process trauma, and when it's processed properly and the wound heals good, we ultimately can move forward in our life, right? So that's when we find ourselves having more bounce back and we're more resilient. However, on the other hand, when trauma is not processed properly, that is where we struggle to move past things. That's where we find ourselves being in a place of stuck and really struggling with depression, low self-esteem, low self-worth, rejection, guilt, sadness, anxiety, anger, all of the things. So what I want to teach you right here is that when we have experienced something negative in our life, or something that we consider to be traumatic for us, we have what is called an adaptive memory about the event, or we have what is called a maladaptive memory, or memories about the event. So when we think about the adaptive memory and we think about the maladaptive memory, these memories ultimately produce either adaptive behaviors or maladaptive behaviors. So I just want to give you a little bit analogy as to what that can look like. So one of the analogies that I shared with the women at the conference is that I want you to imagine your mind being like a GPS system. Adaptive memory gives us a clear, accurate map. It gives us the information that we need. It guides us right to our destination, and it helps us get there the fastest way as possible with less traffic, less accidents, and we can ultimately rely on those directions. So if we think about maladaptive memories and we use the GPS system as an analogy. So when we have maladaptive memories, it can be viewed as a faulty or outdated GPS system. So which basically just means that, okay, it will take us down the wrong road. Sometimes we'll hit a dead end. We'll go in circles. And sometimes we even get lost. It just creates a lot of confusion and it misleads and misguides us. So if we go back to adaptive memory, so if we look at the GPS system analogy, adaptive memories help us to learn and grow, and it helps us to make improvements in our lives to ultimately better our lives and to better ourselves as a person. So when we have adaptive memories, they help us to cope and to navigate through life in a more positive way, and we strive for well-being. So again, when we have these adaptive memories, we ultimately see adaptive behaviors, which are conducive to resilience. We make better decisions. We engage in healthy coping mechanisms. We seek support when we need it. We communicate our needs. We're able to regulate our emotions, and we process our emotions in a good way. We're not afraid to be present with whatever emotion that we're feeling, even though it may not feel good. So if we look at maladaptive memories, on the other hand, maladaptive memories holds us back, and it causes us to stress, and it interferes ultimately with our day-to-day functioning, and it decreases our overall quality of life. So when these memories that are attached to our trauma wounds, our failures, and our negative experiences. These memories stunt our personal growth and development, and it decreases our sense of self-worth. So if we think about this, this ultimately causes us to have maladaptive behaviors. And what maladaptive behaviors can look like is avoidance, us avoiding the pain that comes along with whatever our trauma experience resulted in. It results in fear, not feeling good enough. It results in self-sabotage, codependency, having poor boundaries, overthinking, excessive worry, people-pleasing, holding grudges and unforgiveness, feelings of guilt and rejection. It results in emotional dysregulation, substance abuse, engaging in risky behaviors, engaging in self-injurious behaviors, and having a lot of negative self-talk about yourself. And ultimately, when we have these maladaptive behaviors, sometimes we can really find ourselves taking ownership of things that don't even belong to us, or either finding ourselves trying to be accountable of things that somebody else did to us in a moment where we were powerless in that moment, or in a moment where we were vulnerable and somebody took advantage of us. So, if we think about all these things, how do we heal? How do we heal? What does healing from all of these wounds look like? First and foremost, I want you to understand that healing does hurt. Because when we take the step, when we are intentional about taking the step of healing, we are putting ourselves in a space of vulnerability, and we are confronting these things that we've been avoiding, or maybe some of these things that we didn't even understand. We're learning to be honest and say, I was sexually abused. I was physically abused. I was abandoned. I was cheated on. I lost my family, or whatever your story may be. I want you to remember that during this healing process, we have to allow ourselves to grow through this process, just like the deep cut on our arm, and acknowledge that, okay, this wound is here. And whether other people can see it or not, it's still here. And depending on how severe the wound is, sometimes some wounds take longer than others. So I may have a wound that may heal faster over time, whereas somebody else may have a wound that takes a longer time to heal. But ultimately, I want you to understand that the healing process from trauma still is ongoing, because ultimately life still happens during the process. And in order for us to heal and learn and grow, we have to learn that growth comes with discomfort. And even though it's not easy, we have to learn to lean into that discomfort. It's almost like when you go to the gym and work out. When you go to the gym and work out, your muscles tear and you rebuild stronger after the workout. However, when we are healing from trauma, it's a painful process. It's just like when we tear those muscles after we work out and then we're rebuilding to get stronger. When we have that pain after a good workout, that's that good pain, right? That's that pain that feels good, because we know that we've worked out and we know that we've did the work to put ourselves in position to get stronger, to lose weight, to strengthen up those glutes. Trauma is the same way. When we allow ourselves to be in the space to do this rebuilding and we lean into this pain, even though it hurts, this is that good pain. This is that good pain that is needed to help us to be resilient and to ultimately help us to be in a better space with healing from our trauma. So secondly, we have to understand that healing is not a straight line, and there is no timeline for how long it should take for us to heal. Healing is a lifelong journey again, because even when we feel we are in a good place, life will continue to life, and we will continue to get triggered. However, as you allow yourself to be in this space to heal and process these things, healing comes in waves, and sometimes our journey may look uncertain, and sometimes we may have setbacks, and some days it may feel harder than others. But I want you to know that this is normal, because again, healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It's not a one and done. It's something that you have to be intentional and that you have to continue to lean in to. Number 3, to truly start talking and sharing your stories and promote your healing journey, you definitely have to be in a space where you have safety and you have trust. And what this looks like is that these are things that you absolutely have to have. You have to have a physical or emotional safe environment to be able to talk about the things that you want to talk about. Because ultimately, trust can be a barrier to healing, and this trust sometimes have to be rebuilt. Because if you think about some of our personal experience and some of the things that we've been through, our trust has been violated. And we have been in a space where we've been vulnerable and somebody violated our trust, or either we've shared some things with somebody and somebody didn't respect our story and they shared it with somebody. So then ultimately this will hinder the process, because if we don't have these safe spaces to lean into, then it'll be so hard for us to be able to have that space to talk about the things that we've been through and to be honest and transparent with our truth with somebody else. So ultimately, we have to learn to create these spaces. We have to learn to create these spaces through trust, through our loved ones, through our communities, getting help from a therapist, or just leaning into somebody that we really, really feel that we can confide in, but knowing that when we confide into somebody, that they are going to take our information that we give to them and they are going to hold it with their hearts. And so when somebody chooses you to be that safe person, I want you to respect the fact that they even came to you, and I want you to hold on to them, to their secrets, and be that safe space that they need for you to be. And if you feel that sometimes they share things with you that you feel are beyond your capacity or beyond your qualifications, don't be afraid to help that person and support them in being able to find the help and support that they need. The 4th thing is, we have to learn to see ourselves to shift from seeing ourselves as a victim and start seeing ourselves as a warrior who have survived, and we're on our way to thriving, right? This is just learning how to reframe our narratives. We are not our trauma, and our story does not define who we are today. We are not our trauma, and our story does not define who we are today. So this is just us acknowledging that even though we've been through the things that we've been through, that we did find the strength that we needed to get through these experiences, and that we have found the strength that we needed to acknowledge that I have put myself in a position that I want to move past this. And even though I may not be where I want to be, I am putting myself in a position to allow myself to keep moving forward every day. And this is us just reflecting on our resilience and our growth and our perseverance. Because again, we may not be where we want to be, but the fact that we keep showing up every day, and the fact that we keep trying every day, and that we keep challenging ourselves and challenge those negative thoughts that we deal with every day, and challenge those negative suggestions that the enemy tries to throw our way. And we're trying our best to align our thoughts with the love and growth mindset. This is us showing up for ourselves every day. So if we can just wrap our minds around learning how to reframe that narrative, that even though we are not where we want to be, we are still doing our best to show up every single day. Number 5, we have to learn to be kind to ourselves and be compassionate to ourselves throughout this process. One of the things I hear too many times is that people say, I am broken and I need to be fixed. First and foremost, please understand that you are not broken and you do not need to be fixed. One of the quotes that I shared was that broken crayons still color, and guess what? So do we. So with this, I want you to learn to cultivate a mindset of love and compassion towards yourself. I want you to really, really work hard to relinquish any feelings of shame, self-blame, any feelings of guilt that you have been holding on to. And I want you to wrap your mind around compassion towards yourself. Learn how to decrease that self-criticism and learn how to take ownership of the things that belong to you and let go of the things that don't. It's okay to acknowledge that someone violated you. It's okay to acknowledge that someone made you feel uncertain or made you feel uncomfortable in a way. It's okay to acknowledge that someone did not provide you with the love and support and safety that you needed. And it's equally important to acknowledge when we've made some decisions that contributed to our hurt and pain. When we do this, though, I don't want you to condemn yourself, but I want you to allow yourself to use this acknowledgement to grow and to learn. Number 6, I want you to forgive when you're ready. Now, forgiveness sometimes is a tricky thing, and it's definitely a personal choice for people and something that doesn't need to be rushed. It doesn't mean that we're condoning the trauma, not at all, but releasing the hold that it has on you. So first and foremost, when it comes to forgiving, sometimes we have to start with forgiving ourselves and release the grip of that pain that we're holding on to by letting go of the resentment or anger. And ultimately, that gives us the power during our healing journey to continue to heal. Now, when it comes to forgiving somebody who violated us, again, that is a personal journey that you have to make and that you have to decide on your own. Because again, depending on what your experience is, it's not as easy to forgive somebody who took advantage of you in the moment where you were powerless or where you were vulnerable. But that is something that you have to deal with personally between you and God. Do I say forgive? Yes, absolutely. When to forgive? Again, that is something that is between you and God. Number 7, I want you to increase your self-care. Self-care is so important. And what self-care looks like can be different for everybody. Everybody's self-care journey is different. Self-care can look like setting healthy boundaries with yourself and others, prioritizing your needs and your emotional safety and well-being, even if that means distancing yourself from toxic environments or people, resting and getting plenty of sleep, eating healthy, drinking plenty of water, journaling, listening to music, exercising, going to therapy, spending time with loved ones, leaning into God or your spirituality, whatever self-care looks like for you, exercising. Ultimately, you want to be doing things that brings you joy. Number 9, celebrate your wins along the way. Now, I know oh too well that the healing journey is an actual journey and it takes time and sometimes it feels uncomfortable. But look, I want you to learn to be your number one cheerleader along the way, no matter how small you think your wins are. I want you to learn to embrace every step in the healing process, because every step in the healing process is significant and it's important. So I want you to be mindful to take note of the milestones, such as gaining more peace. When you feel like I am really leaning into peace, I am making peace for myself, I'm increasing my confidence, I am feeling more empowered. I want you to continue to celebrate yourself along this journey, because this is reinforcing that your healing is taking place. And even though it might be taking some time, remember, you are on a continuous journey. So you want to make sure that you are acknowledging and celebrating everything that you're doing. And lastly, I want you to learn how to reground yourself when you need to. If you feel like, you know what, I feel off track, I feel like I'm getting discouraged, I feel like I'm getting distracted, I want you to take the time to reconnect. Reconnect with your healing journey, because yes, I do understand that sometimes you feel disconnected from the present moment, and sometimes you feel overwhelmed by your emotions. Maybe you're overwhelmed by flashbacks, but I really, really want you to learn to pay attention to your body. What is your body telling you? Do some body scanning. What are you feeling in your body? Take some deep breaths. Meditate in prayer, meditate on scripture, meditate on quotes, exercise, disconnect from social media, spend some time with yourself to regroup and get yourself back on track. Get yourself back on track, because I understand that when you are on your healing journey, this is a continuous, brave step that you have to take every day to overcome your fears, to overcome that hurt, and overcome that pain. And we want to make sure that we are not allowing our negative thoughts to interfere with our healing journey, and not allowing ourselves to get comfortable in our hurt and pain and find validations as to why we need to stay there. Because ultimately, again, when we think about healing, if we do not take the step to heal, the pain and the hurt will lie there. It will affect us every day until we make a decision to do something about it. Because ultimately, our pain and our healing is our responsibility. But first and foremost, I want you to know that you don't have to do it alone. Even though it hurts to heal, and even though our healing process is a journey, and it doesn't go in a straight line, it's a brave journey that takes continuous work. So, as you take this information that we talked about today, I want you to take this information and I want you to take it with you every single day. And I don't want you to stop. I want you to continue to show up for yourself every single day. And I want you to be brave for yourself every single day, because it does hurt to heal. And the healing journey is hard, and it's harder than what we think. But ultimately, I want you to know that you are not on this journey alone. You have someone that is there with you. I am there with you. You have so many professionals out there that can help you. Your loved ones that love and support you and that you can trust, they are there for you. So continue on your healing journey. Don't get discouraged in this process. Yes, it hurts to heal, but when you lean into this healing pain, remember, this is the good pain. This is the good pain that we want to lean into, because this is the pain that is going to help us to overcome and to become that better person that we want to be. So remember, you got this. I am rooting for you. I am cheering for you every single day. It hurts to heal, but we are healing to our wholeness. Dr. Naisha here. I pray that you all have an amazing evening and that you have an amazing day. And until next time, remember, your story does not define you.